Hello and welcome to the evolution of innovative technology for accessible STEM. A quick note, we're going to describe each slide for audience members. And this first slide shows the Continual engine and Pearson logos against a white and burgundy background, accompanied by the title of the presentation. Finally, if you're part of the Zoom call and have any questions, please feel free to enter as many of them as you would like, and we'll try to get to them at the end. My name is Rajiv Narayana. I am President and CEO of digital design and development company AnswerSource, as well as Chief Learning Officer of learning automation firm Continual Engine. My colleagues and I are here today to describe our journey of making complicated quantitative and other images accessible for learners with disabilities in an automated fashion. This journey involved assessing what had traditionally been a manual process, experimenting with automation approaches, navigating stakeholder relationships with and influencing behavior, and ultimately collaborating to scale the effort. And the second slide shows photographs of the presenters, starting with Anne-Marie Dittel on the left, Vijayashree Vithantham in the middle, and myself, Rajiv Narayana, on the right. For my self-description, I am an Indian-American man of larger build, about 6'1", with a shaved head and a beard. I use the he, him, his pronouns, and am in my late 40s. With that, I'd like to hand it off to my colleagues on Zoom to introduce and describe themselves. Vijayashree?
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here presenting with Anne-Marie and Rajiv at the Accessing Higher Ground 2021. I've attended the AHT in the last couple of years, but this is my first time presenting at the conference, so I'm very excited. My name is Vijayashree Vithantham. I go by VJ, and I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm Vice President, Partner Engagements with Continual Engine. I've been with the company for a couple of years now. I am joining you from Chicago this morning, although I wish I was there in Denver with all of you. My self-description is that I'm an Asian Indian woman in my early 40s and have brown eyes and dark curly hair. A little bit about my professional background. I worked in higher education and learning for nearly 2 decades, and I've been part of the founding team of 2 companies, AnswerSource and Continual Engine. Over this time, I've helped build impactful partnerships with large clients, including publishers and higher educational institutions. My true passion is to connect with my clients to understand their vision and help bring solutions that enable scalable and accessible learning experiences for everyone. And with this, I'll hand it off to Anne-Marie.
Thank you. And hello, I'm Anne-Marie Dittel, and I work for Pearson as the Accessibility and Compliance Manager. I'm in my mid-50s. I'm of Italian descent. I'm 5'1", but on a good day when I'm rocking my heels, I'm 5'3", and when you're short like me, every inch counts. You know, I've worked for Pearson for about 4 years now. My main role is to set accessibility standards and requirements for our U.S. higher education courseware products. In doing this, I work closely with our vendors and stakeholders, and a large portion of my day really focuses around image description and supplements, such as PowerPoints, PDFs, and Word documents. I live in Arizona and I love our sunny weather, but yes, wish I could be there in person with you as well, experiencing Colorado's cooler weather. However, just grateful for technology and allowing us to participate via Zoom. And back to you, Rajiv.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Next slide, please, Vijayashree. So given that it's the last day of the conference and it's Friday and it's been a long week, we thought we'd take you on a tour of nature as part of our presentation. So this slide shows a picture of a green landscape and blue skies with white clouds, which is meant to represent the ideal world incorporating UDL principles. The text box reads, "An ideal world, universal design for learning principles, create better digital learning experiences for all." My company, AnswerSource, has been building digital learning content since the advent of the CD-ROM that used to be included with physical textbooks. Digital learning has come a long way since that time, but as the saying goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Universal design for learning was a concept born out of the work of CAST, formerly the Center for Applied Technology, who laid out the UDL framework all the way back in 1986. While the framework was in place and many institutions worked to incorporate UDL in their content, as many of us know, it has been a challenge to consistently implement this approach. The reason it is so difficult usually comes down to issues related to familiarity with the framework, prioritization of accessibility, and the perception that it is hard, expensive, and time-consuming to implement. These issues led to a continued march of digital content development that was not accessible. The proliferation of such content has created a compounded problem of how to reinvent current development practices to incorporate UDL, along with what to do about the large volume of legacy content. We faced this issues at my company firsthand, where we worked with some of the largest publishers and universities and companies to build and digitize and create learning experiences for millions of learners. While we used UDL and other frameworks to ensure accessibility, we often ran into constraints. One of the constraints that we encountered had to do with the choices our clients had to make when it came to accessibility. There seemed to never be enough time or money to make everything accessible, so some content was prioritized over others. At the core of the problem was the fact that the process of checking for accessibility tended to happen later in the workflow, and that process was done manually by sometimes expensive subject matter and accessibility experts. The process was slow, the output was inconsistent at best, and professor time is not cheap. After struggling and failing to overcome the challenges with this process, we asked ourselves a very fundamental question. Does it have to be done this way? And now for those UDL proponents in the room, which I think most of us are, of course, the answer is no. But influencing sometimes decades-old workflows was not just an uphill battle. It was not something that we had any control over as a service provider in the industry. That is until we met Pearson, but I'll save that for later. Our discovery led to further exploration of the problem, subsequent conversations with automation and artificial intelligence experts, discussions with accessibility experts, and additional brainstorming with education product owners who knew the process needed to be disrupted, and then ultimately a tool and approach that could automate some, if not all, of the process of producing alternate text for images, including very complex tables, graphs, chemical equations, and other STEM content. While the technological discovery was no small feat, the bigger challenge came when we again encountered the problem of adoption. There remained a reluctance to change, but a healthy cynicism about the efficacy of the tool we had developed. But three things were different now. One, we came armed with a solution that, if tested and trained appropriately, could scale to solve a significant portion of the alternate text problem. Two, we had developed close relationships with key stakeholders who were willing to rock the boat and drive change in their organizations. And finally, three, those stakeholders were supported by leadership in their organizations that had also made a meaningful commitment to accessibility. So once we had developed the product with the help of the community, we began the process of working with actual product teams who were responsible not just for accessibility, but for the overall product, the academic product. We had dozens of experts from different discipline teams review our work. And even though the feedback was universally good, they still had inputs and they wanted to see incorporated. While some of the changes that they requested were relatively minor, they were critical to the success of our innovation. Subject-specific adjustments to the alternate text output helped avoid confusion with highly nuanced descriptions. Client guidelines helped us address issues of preference across a large user base. Work with industry bodies helped us understand and account for how other people were solving the same problem. And all of these insights helped us polish our approach and make it fit with how the accessibility ecosystem was working today. And I wanted to take 1 second to elaborate on that a little bit. The technology that we had developed worked really, really well. And when we had subject matter experts and accessibility experts review it, it met standards, it served the purpose, and it was very, very consistent, reduced the amount of quality assurance that needed to be done on this type of content. But the real thing that we ran into was behavior change. People were used to doing things a certain way. And if we introduced our product in such a way where it required people to change their behavior, we were running into a big problem in terms of them wanting to adopt it. It just made, the perception was that it made their lives a little bit more difficult. So we needed to fit into the existing workflow in order to disrupt it. And that's something that I think is a lesson that we learned through this process. The real learning for us was the significance of the human element in introducing a discontinuous innovation. The benefits of our approach were clear: less than half the cost, half the time, more consistent quality, but that was not enough to ensure adoption. We had to listen, incorporate feedback, and ultimately win the trust of educational gatekeepers responsible for safekeeping student interests. None of this would have been possible without a great product and a few critical industry leaders, insiders who acknowledged its potential. But the real work began when we immersed ourselves in the broader community that would actually implement our innovation. To shed more light on what it takes to use innovation to make digital resources available for all learners, I will now hand it off to Anne-Marie.
In 2016, Pearson made the commitment to accessibility. But we knew this was only the first step towards making our digital products available to all learners. In this first step came getting executive stakeholders on board. And looking back, I think it was probably the easiest step. Around this time, we were making the switch from a traditional publishing company, which mainly produced printed textbooks, to a digital software company. So this was really the perfect time to make sure our digital courseware was fully accessible. I love the picture on this slide, a lone tree in a large vacant field with lots of billowing clouds filling the sky. There were many days our accessibility team felt like this tree, all alone on a cloudy day with lots of work to get done. We had our buy-in from the top, which was fantastic. But in a large organization, executive support is a must, but it's really just the beginning. At times, the ground we had to cover just seemed daunting, especially when looking at all of our legacy content, plus then gearing up for new content on the horizon. The multiple teams and disciplines we also had to work with and kind of get on board with this new way of thinking. And then plus the vast number of vendors that really help build our content for Pearson. At times it just blew my mind looking at all the things we had to get done. But it really made us focus on a strategic roadmap as we moved forward with our accessibility plans, and making sure that our roadmap was realistic was just key. Next. The challenge really laid in the details, the in-betweens of the various steps that go into building digital resources and collaborating with stakeholders involved in making accessible courseware and supplements. We knew that our accessibility efforts had to be scalable, and one of our biggest pain points was getting quality and consistent image descriptions created in a time frame that really fit the workflow production of a textbook. And when you think of a textbook, there are a lot of visual assets within each chapter. Not only do we have the images, but you have icons and other visual aids that help guide the students to cement learning the content. And all of these visual elements require alternative text to provide students who have limited or no sight the same learning opportunities, so they can hear and visualize the image description being read out loud to them by their screen reader as they consume the content on the page. Going the traditional route of hiring a human to write the descriptions was not working effectively or efficiently for us. Some of our biggest struggles were finding subject matter experts who also had the ability to write effective alt text images. But then once we found these experts, we noticed inconsistent writing styles when multiple people were writing the alt text for the textbook. And this was a huge problem for us because we wanted to give the end user, the student, the best user experience possible. And having images described a little differently, page to page, chapter to chapter, really starts to erode the usability of the content. Another struggle was just the time it took to write the alt text. There were times we had to delay the release of a textbook because the alt text wasn't done. It was still being written. And in the publishing realm, delaying a release is like death. But it's tricky because you really can't start writing alt text until the book has gone through several passes and the content on the page is solid. If you start writing alt text too soon and the page changes, then many times you have to go back and redo image descriptions. So unfortunately, you can't start writing the descriptions until later downstream in the workflow. But then we consistently had the obstacle of the book was done, but the alt text wasn't. And finally, just the planning and the organization to then ingest the descriptions back into the textbook. On the slide, I show a close-up picture of fern leaves that have many lines and small brown spots. You know, this truly conveys all the challenges when it comes to planning, complexity of making content accessible. There's always those brown spots that you need to work on. Really, those brown spots came from our STEM titles. You know, STEM was and still is to a big degree our biggest hurdle when making content accessible. In a single STEM course, you know, hundreds, well, more like thousands of images such as figures, structures, and pictures are made accessible, which involves time, expertise, longer workflows, and costs. You know, at Pearson, some of our flagship products are math and science courses. So the need to make these fully accessible with a seamless user experience was even greater. This slide shows hundreds of pumpkins, new and old, laying in a field, ready to be picked and used for fall festivities. This reminds me of all the STEM elements we have, some more complex than others, but despite their complexity, we needed to make sure they were accessible for all students so anyone could take a higher level STEM class and be successful. And as our accessibility team really began to examine our challenges, we knew that identifying the right technology, solution, and partner that could bring exponential efficiencies became increasingly important as we began looking at our large volume of content. Our team reached out to many companies claiming they had AI technology that could create image descriptions for us. Unfortunately, I sat through many demos with disappointment because describing STEM images is just so challenging. Until I met Continual Engine at a conference like this. You know, talking to them, quickly I knew something was different about the company and what they had to offer. However, I must admit, I was cautiously optimistic. You know, after their demo and giving them some of our samples of our toughest STEM images, my excitement started to grow as I really understood the tool's capabilities. We were finally seeing AI technology deliver high quality and very accurate image descriptions with very little human intervention. And at this point, I knew Continual Engine were the partners we had been looking for. You know, this picture on the slide is a colony of sea lions lounging and napping on a dock. There's one sea lion kind of set apart from the rest. It almost looks like he's addressing the pack, with only one sea lion kind of raising his head with interest. At times, I felt like I was the sea lion saying, hey, I found a solution for our image descriptions that really fit into our workflow production schedules. But no one was really listening or wanted to try it out. You know, our teams just kind of kept their heads down. And hey, I get it. Change is hard. You know, coming out of that comfort zone is scary. We all have our set workflows, and it's difficult to deviate from them, even when workflows aren't working well. But I kept talking to people, asking them, tell me your pain points, walking them through the possibility of using AI technology as a solution. And we started slow. We started one title, which led to another title, which led to a couple of more titles. And then another discipline kind of popped their head up and said, okay, we'll give it a try. And slowly the buzz began to grow that the Invicta tool was not only a huge time saver when it came to creating image descriptions, but the quality and consistency was nothing like we had seen before. Transformation takes time, even with the best intentions, stakeholder commitments, and finding the right partners. It's been about 2 years now, and I can finally say that we've built up a strong momentum within our STEM disciplines that are using the Invicta tool. It's been fun to hear our teams reporting positively on image descriptions rather than, them holding up the production release dates anymore. Compared to 2 years ago, that's all I heard. Now I hear how it really works well within their current work stream. The quality is fantastic. And I even hear how our internal QA alt text reporting teams are turning around their findings faster because the quality and the consistency is at a higher caliber. So they're not always stopping and reporting bugs and opening tickets. At Pearson, we still have a long road ahead of us. We have a lot of legacy content to remediate, but with partners like Continual Engine and the Invicta tool, I'm confident we're on our way. A lot has been done to make our products accessible, but we still have more work to do. And this slide shows a small mountain peak that pokes out of lush green landscapes. It stretches into vibrant blue sky above, admiring the single white cloud paying it a visit. The image plays off the transformation from fall to spring, illustrating the arrival of true accessibility is achieved through understanding the considerations, planning effectively, and building harmony within the existing environment. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to VJ.
Thank you, Anne. So when we talk about the long road ahead of us, I visualize accessibility and equity as a journey. And in this journey, what matters most is our building towards long-term success and scalability and empowering everyone along the way. This slide shows a long exposure of a waterfall with tall green leaves and moss-colored rocks. And this, to me, conveys the nature of long-term success, scalability, and the progress we're making in accessibility. Our journey with Pearson has been one of collaboration, mutual trust, and true transformation. What started as an interesting conversation has now become a true partnership. And both sides, we've been focused on bringing long-term success to accessibility and equity. And we're doing this by building affordable, scalable, and measurable advancements. What we have achieved together has come from great insight, good technology, and the support of community. In the next portion of the session, I'd like to share more details on our AI tool, Invicta, and its ability to generate high-quality image alt text within seconds across most major disciplines, including STEM. Pearson and Continual Engine have partnered together to leverage Invicta's capabilities to generate alt text for Pearson's digital content. Invicta means undefeated in Latin. We developed Invicta with the vision to make image accessibility easy, scalable, and very affordable, while at the same time empowering faculty, accessibility teams, and subject matter experts. Our early collaboration with Pearson and a couple of other marquee clients included extensive testing and vetting of the alt text output while training Invicta across new images and disciplines. The investment that went into developing Invicta's capabilities not only brought significant savings in time and costs for Pearson's alt text engagements, but also has benefited a much broader audience. Invicta currently recognizes and automates alt text descriptions for images in math, accounting, chemistry, physics, economics, finance, statistics, engineering, and many more disciplines. Okay. I have turned off the audio just so you can hear my description of what you are seeing on the screen here. This opening screen reads, Invicta, AI-powered alt text services for engineering images. And as I play the next screen, shows Invicta's dashboard where the user can select the discipline related to the image or images they are processing. So here you'll see math, chemistry, tables, engineering, physics, computer science. And we also have several other disciplines, and that is something we can cover. And then the next screen, which shows step 1, which is upload file where the user can select the subdiscipline or image type. So here on the screen, you have 3 radio buttons, which say circuits, block diagrams, and node diagrams. And you have the option of being able to drag and drop the files or being able to select it from your local computer. Then the next screen, it shows the uploaded images. And essentially, you have an individual, in this case, who is selecting from their local computer. And then they click open. And then the next screen shows generate. Here you have the option actually of selecting a short description, a long description, or both. And then once you hit generate, it's really as exactly as it appears, which is that within seconds, there is a long description that's generated in this case. And I'm sorry, for some reason it went back to the first screen. Coming back, and I just want to take a moment to read out a partial description of the image. The image is of a circuit diagram, and the text here reads, the circuit contains a total of 7 elements. The elements present in the circuit are 1 inductor, which is labeled as L subscript 1, 3 resistors, which are labeled as R subscript 1, R subscript 3, R subscript 2, 2 capacitors, which are labeled as C subscript 2, C subscript 1, 1 source, which is labeled as V subscript 1, T. One end of the component, V subscript 1T, is connected to R subscript 2. And with that, I'll just move on, and that's a longer description. And we are very happy to share samples if anyone would be interested in looking at the output. The next portion, I just want to briefly show you what happens when a user is using this. So in this case, the user decided to go in and make some edits to the alt text description. And again, this can be done for various reasons. If you're looking to make customizations or based on where the alt or the image is appearing. And in this case, the user's inputting the figure illustrates a circuit, comma. And then they've made a couple of changes to the capsizing. And then you hit update. And that's basically how you can generate the alt text description. Our clients currently are leveraging Invicta's capabilities in a couple of different ways. One is they directly send us images and we can process these through Invicta, have them reviewed by our in-house experts, and then submit the alt text description in the client's preferred formats. Or we are also exploring with several clients integrating with our APIs, and that is currently being refined. And so with this, I'm going to go back to our presentation and hand it back to Rajiv for closing remarks, as well as we'd love to invite some questions from the audience.
And so Anne-Marie, I wanted to ask you, did you have any advice, for us more broadly about how to help risk-averse organizations, adopt new approaches? In a world where digital adoption and technological advancement are growing exponentially, there are always new risks and opportunities to consider. So how do we balance the need to stay agile with the desire to carefully consider the efficacy of new approaches? And Anne-Marie, I ask you this question because you must get, you described earlier that there were a number of vendors and organizations that have approached you. I'm just wondering, what advice do you have for the group here in terms of considering new technologies and approaches?
The one thing early on, as we started our journey looking for a partner, like I said, we had looked at many different companies and we were very cautious. We didn't want to jump into something that really didn't give us the results we were looking for. So we took a lot of time early on to figure out what we needed and what that would look like. And so we took stock in, our titles. We kind of even narrowed it down to different disciplines that have the biggest need. From there, like I said, we kind of started looking for AI that could do image description, because that was one thing we knew was a huge need for us, especially in our STEM. Prior to that point, we had found wonderful tools, but if we were throwing different tools at our teams, there'd be a point where they just say, okay, enough is enough, this isn't really working for us. So we were very methodical on when we went to our teams, what we showed them and what we shared. So there was a lot of kind of behind the scenes that our accessibility team did, and it still does, before we even share it. And so I know, that slide with the sea lions, I was just so excited because we had finally found something that we knew would work well within our ecosystem. And it was still difficult to kind of get everyone on board. I think people just very naturally are hesitant to jump in. And so taking it slow, but we knew whatever we were going to jump in with had to be something that we were confident would work within our current workflow productions.
Great.
And
thank you.
Yeah, we found you, and the rest is history.
Well, we appreciate your advocacy, because without it, I don't think we would have gotten the support that we got. But as far as the path forward for Pearson, you described earlier that there's a lot more that we need to do, and I think something that would be useful for myself and for everybody else in the room is what are the problems that need to be tackled next. Alt text is a big one. There are a lot of images, and getting through that is an important element. But beyond that, I've spoken with a couple of your colleagues about this in a similar fashion, about interactive content and things like that. But I'm just kind of wondering what's on your radar or your wish list in terms of technologies or innovation that you'd like to see the industry pursue.
On my personal wish list, yes, I had mentioned kind of our STEM is a big hurdle for us. Yep, I think image description, we're kind of getting that worked out. But, with our math and our science equations, MathML, we use MathML, and that's kind of the industry standard. But then you also have a lot of moving parts that kind of break MathML, such as, what browser you're using, what technology, what screen reader you're using. And so that's still not stable. And so rendering math is still difficult. And, right now Pearson kind of tells our students, okay, we suggest you use, this browser with this combination of screen reader. But that's difficult. We all have our favorite browser. We all have, our piece of AT equipment that we, like to use. And so it would be nice if, as an industry, we can really figure out how to get MathML rendered seamlessly. There's MathJax that kind of comes into Chrome, but there's still a lot of quirks and just hiccups that unfortunately, our end user, the student, has to deal with. And so I know that's kind of the next big hurdle I would love to see the accessibility community really tackle. And people are working on it. There are lots of wonderful people out there that are working on it. We just haven't got there yet.
Yeah. And I've seen a few sessions here. Some of them I've been able to attend, some not, about innovation in that regard. And then we did get some questions before we started the session about, that were leading into how could I use this as an individual, the Invicta tool, and other innovations, that allow me to solve problems on the fly. So I think that tool set, right now we have a lot of discrete tools out there, and you can use them as you need to or as a project demands, but having a comprehensive set of tools in one place is something that I think that a lot of people are looking for. And, so we'll continue to work in that regard. But, thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Vijayashree, for joining us today. And thank you to everybody in the audience for joining us on the last day of the conference. We appreciate you being here, and I'll stick around a little bit, but I'm going to let Vijayashree and Anne-Marie go. So if you have any additional questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to add before we sign off that we do have an accessible version of the presentation available at the AHG, where the learning resources are available. So please reach out. And then on this last slide, we also have our contact information. Rajiv can share it with each of you, anyone who's interested to reach out to any of us here. Thanks so much for your time, and I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend and a lovely Thanksgiving holiday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.